The Long Island serial killer. Well, police say they caught their man, but did they? Did they really catch the one responsible for the 11 bodies that were found? You see, there are some that say there's still another killer out there, and we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crime Buster. Yep, it's what some people are calling the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals interviewed and participating in this show, and do not represent those of Charlie Crime Buster or Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Charlie Crime Buster. Well, today we're going to talk about, among other things, the possibility, of there being another killer connected to the bodies that were found along the coast there in Long Island and the greater area. For now, though, let me take a moment to welcome each and every listener to the podcast. Yes, it does humble me that you're taking the time to join us in our quest for truth in this investigation. Thank you for being a part of the Crime Buster family. Hey, if you'd like to get other episodes of Charlie Crime Buster that you may have missed, well, just go on over to charliecrimebuster.com. charliecrimebuster.com. There are tons of other podcasts available that we produce. And also, we always invite you and others to reach out with a shout-out. That's right, you can reach me at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. You can make suggestions about episodes, ask questions, and even lodge objections. That's right. It's a safe place even for you to disagree. Again, reach me, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Hey, if you'd like to support the program, well, go on over to peacemakernetwork.com, peacemakernetwork.com. There you can become a badge, BADGE supporter. There, you will not only help us with the program, but you also help law enforcement, first responders, and the military. That is peacemakernetwork.com. All right, that's our housekeeping out of the way. When Rex the killer, when he was arrested a few weeks ago, I should say Rex the alleged killer, when he was arrested a few weeks back for the three murders of the Gilgo Four, three of the murders of the Gilgo Four, it was reported that the Long Island serial killer had been caught. But I'm asking you, has he? Now, there is some good news. You see, when Rex the killer allegedly was arrested just a few days ago, there was a relief in the Long Island area. While many thought they got their guy, others were not convinced that he was guilty of all the bodies that was found in the area. But good news for many, was that he was arrested. And now, thankfully, there will be focus on many others that have gone missing, only to find their bodies with no killer. Now, I'm not saying that he was not responsible for the Gilgo Four, but remember there were up to 11 bodies found. The question is he responsible for the killing of all those people? Some think so. Others, they're not so sure. But my friend, one thing we can be sure about, there are a lot more killers out there who have not yet been caught for killing sex workers. You see, back in 2006, there was the discovery of 4 dead women in a drainage ditch just outside the Atlantic City. It was indeed shocking news way back in 2006. In fact, international media flocked to the seaside gambling resort. More than 100 detectives and prosecutors were assigned to investigate. And all the people there, the casino guests, they were worried about safety. And the victims' fellow sex workers, they even began to carry hidden knives to protect themselves. But as the years passed, the public's attention and fear faded. And the case, which was called, quote unquote, the Eastbound Strangler, You see, he was called the eastbound strangler because, well, it was the direction that the victims' heads were all facing. Remember, I talked to you about how serial killers will often stage their victims? Well, he would stage them that their head was facing east. Thus, he was called the eastbound strangler. But now the arrest this month of old Rex the Killer, who was charged of killing 3 of the women whose remains was found on Long Island back in 2010. Well, now there's fresh life into these long dormant cases, and they all have they're obviously similar, aren't they? They're parallels to the Gilgo Beach killers. Now, remember, Gilgo Beach killing, there's 11 victims actually, and most of them were young female sex workers, but not all. You see, this recent breakthrough, well, there are a lot of people hoping that this will rekindle public interest, and it will highlight a very painful truth, that there are a lot of cases, just like the one I mentioned in Atlantic City, that still remain open. Now, we're going to mention some of those whose killers are still unaccounted for in a minute, but right now, it's time to, take a little break, step back, pause to relax for just a moment in this dark stuff that we cover, and share with you what we do every week, our Crazy Crook story. Well, by now you know, by listening to our podcast, that drunk driving is something that I take quite seriously. You see, innocent people are killed by intoxicated drivers. And as a patrol officer, in my former life as a police officer, as a patrol officer, I always felt I was doing the public good by getting drunk drivers off the road. But my friend, our Crazy Crook story today, he puts a little different spin on it. Our Crazy Crook comes from Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And there is a guy by the name of Mitchell DeLatty. He is the star of our Crazy Crook story. You see, it appears that Mr. DeLatty, he thought he was special enough to drive drunk and get away with it. Yep, he took a chance that no one should take. You see, my friend, you're just not chancing the fact that you might get caught. More importantly, you're chancing the fact that you may injure and even kill others by your own irresponsible actions when you drive while intoxicated. But Mr. DeLatty, he thought he was getting away with it. But then he decided, maybe I better not take any more chances, so he thought he would just pull over to a motel, take a room for the rest of the night. So, that's what he thought. And so when he walked up to the desk, he replied that he had been driving for some time and needed a room for the night. Only problem. You can't make this stuff up. It was not a motel that he pulled into his drunken condition, but rather it was a state trooper station. Yep, patrol station. And the desk, my friend, was not manned by a clerk, but by a state trooper. So Mr. DeLatty, who already admitted he was driving, right there on the spot, he was arrested for DUI, driving under the influence. Well, at least he made it easy for the troopers to make an arrest. And so Mr. DeLatty, who was so drunk that he did not realize that he pulled into a state trooper station rather than a hotel, Mr. DeLatty is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the week. Now, people are saying that there may be more than one serial killer out there connected to the Long Island killings. One thing for sure, there are far more than one uncaught serial killer out there. In fact, the FBI would not say how many killings of sex workers in the United States remain unsolved. But from media accounts and statements from a lot of local authorities, I'm afraid it shows a long trail of open cases. From 9 women whose bodies were found along the highways in Massachusetts to 11 found dead in New Mexico, and 8 more found amid the crawfish farm swamps of southern Louisiana. Then there's the killing of other sex workers in Chicago, New Haven, Connecticut, Ohio, among other places. Well, you can see the killing of sex workers, well, my friend, it goes way back, even from the days of old Jack the Ripper in London in the 1880s. You see, serial killers, particularly those preying on sex workers, have often gotten away with it, in part because victims are easy targets, living on the margins of society. Hey, here's a name you will probably know if you're a true crime fan. Gary Ridgway. Yep, remember him? He was called the Green River Killer, and he was convicted of 49 killings in Washington State. Well, Mr. Ridgway, Gary Ridgway, that monster, he said at a court hearing in 2003, this is one in which he pleaded guilty, he said that he chose sex workers because, well, they would not be missed quickly, if at all. And here's a quote from Gary Ridgway. Quote, "I picked prostitutes because I thought I could kill as many of them as I wanted without getting caught." End of quotes. That's what Ridgway said. You see, two women were out for an afternoon walk near Atlantic City back in November 2006. There they found a body in the ditch. They called the police, and the police quickly found 3 others nearby. You see this $15 a night motel in Egg Harbor Township, behind which 4 bodies were found? Well, today it's long gone, thankfully. It was torn down in an attempt to clear a seedy area, one that was known for crime, drugs, disturbances, but also the murders of Barbara Bredor, Molly Jean Diltz, Kim Raffo, Tracy Ann Roberts. All of these are people, somebody's daughter. And because it was near the ocean like Gilgo Beach, well, the location, a lot of people are thinking maybe there's a single killer. But others have pointed out that oceanside areas, well, they're often the remotest locations after hours. You see, Gilgo Beach, though, it's about 3.5 hours drive from Atlantic City. And remember I told you that these women are somebody's daughter? Well, Joyce Roberts, her daughter is one of those named Tracy Ann. She was one of the 4 Atlanta City area victims. She went on to say, "I kind of lost hope of anyone was even searching for the killer anymore." She went ahead to say, "The first 6 months, the prosecutor did get on the phone with me, told me they were working on it. Then, well, it just fell off the radar. It was like nobody cared anymore." There are others who believe the same way. There's a lady by the name of Phoenix Kalia. She's a former sex worker from Chicago, but now she advocates for them through a project called the Sex Workers Outreach Project. Now here's a term that's a sad term. She went on to say, quote, "Police departments often refer to it as an NHI case, NHI, which stands for no humans involved." She went on to say, "You feel like the only way you'll be remembered is when they catch the serial killer who killed you. Then they'll make 5 movies about him, and no one will ever remember your name." So sad, but so true. And Massachusetts State, well, they're investigating 9 unsolved homicides, possibly committed by the same person. That's what a spokesperson for the agency said. He said there's 2 additional missing persons cases now that may be homicides related to the other 9. And another spokesman now for the police department there in New Mexico. He said that the New Mexico cases remain actively investigated with multiple detectives working them. By the way, all 11 of those victims were also involved in drugs and prostitution. They put up a reward there of $100,000. 2 of the victims there was just 15 years of age. You see, folks, despite the decade-long efforts of local, state, and federal task force with Louisiana, remember that one? You probably even saw some specials on TV about it. They still have 8 unsolved apparent homicide cases involving sex workers between 17 and 30 years of age. Remember, their bodies were found in the marshy areas of Jennings, a little small town there in Cajun country, between 2005 and 2009. And now, even the prosecutors of the New York, Suffolk County, well, those are still investigating the Gilgo Beach cases. Now they're in touch with other law enforcement agencies. Everything's being looked at, he said. Even Atlantic County Prosecutor William Reynolds said the 4 cases from the drainage ditch outside of Atlantic City remain active. But he would not say how many detectives are there. He did not report or comment on the Long Island case. Well, Joyce Roberts, one of the victims there from Atlantic City, she said no one from law enforcement was called since the arrest of Rex the Killer. Even in Las Vegas, where Rex the Killer owns a timeshare, well, now they're investigating whether Rex the Killer may be involved in cases involving the killing of sex workers there. And in the months immediately after the bodies of those in Atlantic City, well, law enforcement agencies there had 140 people assigned to that case. But by the time of the first anniversary, those 140, well, the total fell down to 85 investigators. And again, the lady there, Phoenix, she says an attacker knows you can't or won't report it. Said even there, sex workers are frequently robbed by people who know that they're carrying cash. Sometimes they're coerced into sexual activity. And again, of course, they're saying nobody's going to report it, you see. She went on to say when you become friends with them and one day suddenly they're not there, we'd all go out asking, looking for them. A few days later, body was always found. And there was always a fear that there was a serial killer. Well, now, folks, we all hope that these cases that I mentioned to you will get new attention. But the attention I want to bring to you right now is this. Is Rex the Killer responsible for all the 11 bodies found in his area? In a moment, we're going to talk about that. But now I think it's a good time for us to be reminded that lots of times missing people, that's the first report you hear about someone who is a victim of a serial killer. And now our producer, James Buckland, reminds us of another missing person.
Thank you, Charlie Crimebuster. This week we're reporting on a black African-American female by the name of Donita L. Wilkerson. She went missing on Sunday, June the 21st of 2020, Father's Day, missing out of Evansville, Indiana. She's a mother of 6 beautiful daughters. She is a daughter herself. She is also a sister, a niece, an aunt, a cousin, and also a friend. And again, as we mentioned, she went missing on June 21st of 2020 out of Evansville, Indiana. She was just beginning to rebuild her life. She was making commitments with her family to do better, not to blame others, and taking responsibility for her actions and her mistakes. She was taking ownership of her choices, and then all of a sudden, she's hit with this abduction. So if you have any information concerning this person, Donita L. Wilkerson, you may contact the FBI Indianapolis office at 317-595-4000 or the Evansville Police Department at 812-436-7979 or the tip line at 812-435-6194. You may also contact your local FBI office or the nearest American Embassy or Consulate. Again, those numbers, FBI 317-595-4000, Evansville Police Department 812-436-7979 or the tip line 812-435-6194.
Thank you, James, for reminding us that there are real people out there that are still missing. Now, even before the Long Island killer, Rex the Killer, was arrested, there has been disagreement among law enforcement authorities as to the bodies found being the work of one serial killer or more than one. It is a fact that at least one of the bodies was not the work of Rex the Killer. That's right, one we know of was not the work of him. I pulled this research about the Long Island killer even before the arrest of Rex the Killer. It's an older article. Went on to say the search for the Long Island serial killer continues And police, now get this, are keeping their minds open to the possibility there is more than one killer at work. This was even before Rex was arrested. And that theory, of course, raises frightening possibility, well, that the bodies found along the Long Island beach may have been dumped by different killers at different times. And that this remote place had somehow become a convenient place to dump the bodies. In other words, a common body dump. Now, according to reports in the New York Post, well, the skull and bones found in Nassau County back some time ago are not connected to the 8 victims in Suffolk County since last December. It was now believed that those remains, my friend, those remains are different. In fact, it is now believed that those remains could be linked to the Long Island butcher. That's a guy by the name of Joel Deaf Rifkin. You see, the remains were so old and the roots was actually growing around the vertebrae and the skull. And many people believe that this is one or two of Joel Rifkin's victims who were never found, or maybe the work of another killer. You see, it was back in 1993 that Joel David Rifkin, he was 52 years of age at the time, he confessed to murdering 17 prostitutes. He strangled, dismembered them, having picked them up on the streets of New York City. He dumped their bodies upstate New York and along Long Island's East End. Now, they are actually saying now, especially at that time, it was Irish-born Suffolk County Police Commissioner Richard Dorma, he's saying it's possible that the 8 other bodies found along the coast of the Long Island, well, that it was dumped by different killers. In fact, he said there was no connection that they could find between Long Island murders and the Atlantic City murders in 2006. Now, the police caught Rifkin when they stopped him for missing a license plate. And there, they found, in his trunk, the body of a dead woman. Now, Rifkin, he's serving a life sentence upstate New York prison. Hey, can I take just a moment to have a quick sidebar? I want to salute our patrol officers out there on the street. See, the best job I ever had in law enforcement? Well, it was the role of patrol officer. Where else do you get a front seat on life? By the way, it was the way that Ted Bundy was caught. Caught him twice. You remember he escaped a couple of times. Each time he was caught, it wasn't a detective. It was a patrol officer on the street doing his patrol. I've often said if Ted Bundy knew how to drive, he may not have been caught. Nope, it wasn't detectives, but it was patrol officers doing their job out there on the street. So, my friend, I salute them. They do much, much more than just hand out traffic tickets. Well, now, so far, since the search began back in 2010, well, police found, we know now, 11 bodies. And one of those bodies was a small child. So you see, a lot of people think that this is way out of the method of operation of Rex the killer. You see, while the foursome, the Gilgo Four, they're more likely linked. The connections between the other victims, which also include a toddler and an Asian male, well, that's a little different. They weren't all killed the same way. Some of them were dismembered and scattered at other locations along the beach area, and they do not all match the demographic profile. In fact, a guy by the name of O'Toole, he said, I think there's a good possibility that there is more than one killer. In this case, you have young women whose first contact is an online escort service. Their remains are in a burlap bag. We now know that's a camouflage burlap bag along the sound, and their manner of death is strangulation. But then you have a whole other set of victims. These have been dismembered. Now, their remains have been found in the same area, but he goes on to say the distinction between dismemberment and non-dismemberment, he says, is significant. Yet another criminologist, Kelly, well, he disagrees. He says it's hard for him to believe that 2 serial killers could have found the same dump site. Yet we know that, well, at least one of those bodies wasn't Rex the killer's. He says it's extremely rare that they both would decide to dump bodies in the same patch of land or on the same highway. He goes on to say this guy could have started with one MO, method of operation, and then for whatever reason decided that wasn't safe anymore and decided to use a different means of his disposal. Well, in summary, There are some that do not believe the same person is responsible for the other bodies other than the Gilgo Four. Again, the victims were not the same type of victims. One is an Asian, one is a child. They were not killed the same way. They were not staged the same way. On the other hand, again, sometimes serial killers change their method of operation. Let me ask you a question. What do you think? I think there's no doubt that we all believe that Rex the killer is responsible for the Gilgo Four. But what about the other victims? What about the other victims that are different, that have been staged different, that have been killed differently? Is there another serial killer that has not yet been arrested? And by the way, and all this evidence, this trove of evidence, and the good job that the task force did in catching the killer of the Gilgo Four? Well, we haven't seen any evidence linking Rex the killer to any of these other bodies. Was he so good that there's no evidence to be found? Or is there more evidence that we're going to read about that does indeed tie him to the other bodies? That's a question yet to be answered. Would love to have your take on it. Give me a shout out. CharlieCrimebuster@gmail.com. CharlieCrimebuster@gmail.com. But for now, have we caught the Long Island serial killer? Or did they just catch the killer of the Gilgo Four? That question has yet to be answered. So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert, yep, for the life you save, it may be your very own.